Happy Friday, we're back, and I'm going to punch this button to maximize our audio quality. I'm Tara Thomas.
And I'm Amanda Goodman. Happy Friday. We made it. I am wearing one of my most obnoxious jackets because it's game day. My birds, we play the Packers. They're in Brazil tonight, so it's exciting.
I love that you have all that sort of vintage sportswear.
I mean, look at it. It's like the satin. Remember
it's
like the satin from the 80s?
It's like so trendy because it's like athletic leisure. Is that what they call it?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I remember if you thought of wearing something casual, it was definitely reserved for off work or not, professional settings. And now
I'll wear this to church.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll wear it to church.
In some ways, that's kind of a good thing, how we've evolved with the way that the expectations we have. But then I'm one who feels like a lot of people underdress in the work world. I'm still kind of old school in that way.
Well, yeah, I think 1,000%. I know the first time I went to a meeting outside of news, I dressed very much down. And it wasn't me being arrogant or but it was one of those things that's like, okay, it doesn't matter what I'm wearing. You're going to listen to me. I have a seat at the table now, but I don't know.
So what a show last night in Marshalltown. We have to give a big thank you to the Marshalltown Arts and Civic Center.
Oh.
Incredible space. So well done.
Their green room.
Yeah. A huge green room with these incredible multiple vanity lights. I mean, it was a lineup like that movie Showgirls when you're getting ready to take the stage for a high kick. And I loved how she had the signs up. Everything was so organized. And the room we were in, it was this reception hall called Monet Hall. And I just thought that was so impressive, that whole facility.
It was just really good energy, right? And the older I get, the more I feed off energy, no matter what it is. And it's these crowds. We're just so lucky and blessed that for the women who come to these shows and the men who come to our shows, but the majority women, because they're there. Like we said, women our age, they don't want to go to the bars and hang out and have a girls' night. They want to have a girls' night and something different. And I feel like they come and they laugh a lot and they cry and they kind of get ready to kick down some doors when they leave. So it always fills my bucket.
It's same. And one of the things we are most proud of is it is a multi-generational experience. So last night, a woman came up to us after the show. 4 generations of her family came to see us, and how special that they get to talk about and hear the message that we are so adamant about, which is you have to really respect those matriarchs in your family, the women, the mothers, the grandmothers who are still with us, who have so much wisdom to impart to us.
I would give anything if my grandmother was still alive.
She would love the show.
She would love the show. And I believe that quote that says youth is wasted on the young, because I didn't appreciate my grandmother enough when I was younger. And she passed away, 8 years. No, I'm sorry. Excuse me. It's been 10 years. And, if you have your grandmother, just go hear the stories, go listen to them. Even if you've heard them 1,000 times, go hear them 1,000 times more. Because I would do anything, to hear that story again. And I don't want to switch gears too rough, but we do have to talk about the news of the week. Of course, there was a fatal shooting, in Georgia, 14-year-old. And the breaking news this morning is the father has now been charged, because the father of the gunman, we will not say his name. We will not give him any notoriety, because I believe that's what he wanted. We will tell you he was only 14 years old. The father has been charged. A long laundry list of criminal charges, because he bought his son this AR-15 for Christmas. And I'm not going to get into the gun debate, because this is, still technically like news. It's not about that. But we always talk about thoughts and prayers, and those are great and those are wonderful, but there needs to be change. And I feel like every school in this country needs to have one point of entry.
Absolutely.
And they need to have metal detectors.
Agreed.
Enough. You're saying that your children are caged and you feel like they're not safe going through a metal detector. You go through them when you get on an airplane. You go through them in a courthouse. You go through them to watch your beloved, Philadelphia Eagles team. You go through them everywhere. Why would you not want your children to go through? So you make sure that they're safe. Because this is the thing I told my husband last night. Kids have bad days. Kids have really, really, really bad days. You know what? Some of them, they're bullied or whatever. Kids do not have their frontal lobe. Their frontal lobe is not formed until they're 25. So they cannot see past this bad day. So who knows when they're going to make that one decision that's going to ruin lives forever. So I'm off of that. I mean, I get really hot about it, but put metal detectors in every dang school in this
100%.
country.
We talk about it all the time. It is no longer a sign of, something being quote unquote bad or wrong about your district. In fact, it's showing that you're taking a very proactive approach to keeping everybody safe, and that includes the teachers. I mean, for me, having a family of educators, watching that unfold, it's always horrific because inevitably the teacher or the coach is the frontline person because they do risk their lives for the children that they're charged to watch and care for during the day. And so it just used to always send shudders through my spine when I would see those stories, because my husband, he was the hall person who was always out there greeting the kids. He was the one who was intervening when there were conflicts. And so, I mean, he truly would have been like that coach who, Ricky, who was the assistant football coach who was shot. And obviously, when you think about, as you just described, the way that our culture has shifted, we've come to, ever since 9/11, really, when it comes to the airport security being heightened, and now any professional sporting event, any concert, we are so conditioned to be okay with that because we know this is the right thing, because you're not targeting one person. You're saying everybody equally needs to be screened, and you go through the metal detector, and it takes an extra 30 seconds of your time. When we were just at that urgent care in Kansas because of Dave's kidney stone, I was wanded by a security gentleman when I walked into the ER, and I thought that was completely acceptable because in those high stress moments, people get irrational. And so it's good. And then the mental health issue when people come into the ER. So all of those things collectively, it makes sense that we always put a metal detector or some kind of screening as a priority in all of these multi-million-dollar school facilities that everybody's building. I don't hear anyone mentioning metal detectors or extra cameras. Or I mean, why are we not using the technology that's so cheap that exists and touting that as one of the benefits of the new building? I mean, these new spacious schools have all glassed in, drawing in the light atriums, and we never talk about the kids inside are truly almost like a sitting duck. But if you have all these extra security measures in place, I think for peace of mind, parents and taxpayers are willing to pay more to ensure that they're sending their children and their grandchildren to a secure environment.
I think it's, we live in Iowa, and I'm from Pennsylvania. So, and Pennsylvania has major cities, big cities, and small, but like Iowa's really small towns. I think, no disrespect to anything, out in the Midwest, but I think it's this mentality. It's never going to happen here. And oh my goodness, if we have metal detectors, then people are going to come to our school and they're going to think it's not safe. No, exactly. I'm thinking the exact opposite. If you're dealing with two people from like cities, we're thinking, wow, they're doing whatever they can to make sure everyone in the school is safe. Everyone. Our teachers should not go into school and wonder, okay, if someone comes in, what am I going to do? Where are these going to kids? My children should not go to school and wonder where they're going to hide. They should not. That's it. I mean, it's insane. And if you are one of those people who says, oh, metal detectors, I don't want to hear, I don't want to hear from you. I get so irritated about this because here we are again, because the cycle's going to continue. Today we're going to turn on the national news and we're going to see all the politicians battling, talking about mental health, talking about gun control. So our thoughts and prayers, enough. Like enough. Just stop kicking the can down the road. Do something to protect our children. Do something. Because come Monday, no one's going to be talking about this school shooting. No one's going to be talking about those victims again because we do it every single time.
Right. It's so cyclical. And it is sadly a society, so many elements of our life were reactive. So only when something happens do they then put in the safety measures. So I applaud that district that actually already had what, as of last week, they had implemented like a life alert. And so each teacher, each staff member had a badge, and you press a button on the badge and that immediately notifies authorities. And the staff that I saw interviewed said they do believe, as tragic as it was to lose 4 people, they do believe these alerts that each of them was able to press triggered law enforcement to respond more quickly. And there was an SRO in that building that intervened as well. And so I've always been an advocate for school resource officers.
Absolutely.
One thing that I can tell you in my time working in schools, those officers built relationships with students. And that's critical, because when you think about, as she described, kids that are having these mental health issues, it's imperative that you have officers in the building who are familiar with the patterns of behavior. They know the kids. They overhear, the hall conversations like the custodial staff. They sort of are the eyes and ears of the building. And you really need those kinds of adult expert, minded when it comes to security to be able to have that presence in the building. So I'm always going to support school resource officers. And I think a lot of people, the narrative shifted in recent years to where it was like, oh, you're policing our kids. But what I can tell you, what I've experienced, it has kept kids from being on a school to prison pipeline, because once the police officer forms a relationship with a student, they are less likely then to get pushed into the juvenile detention system if the officer understands the history of what led them to maybe one bad decision.
Oh, I agree. I know where my kids go to school, there's a school resource officer, and he has a great relationship with the kids, and they know him, and my kids feel safer, but they also still don't. I mean, and every time something like this happens, I see a couple of my kids' brain health kind of like swirl, because one of my kiddos was like, I was looking, like I spent a lot of time in class looking around to see where do I hide, where do I get out? That is not okay. So stop worrying about what your school's going to look like, what the perception is. The perception from the smart people is we're doing whatever we can to keep this kid safe. So if it's in your budget and, you have bond elections and you're doing all these things, it's kind of like working in TV news, right? Every station that we've ever worked, they've always done some kind of remodel. The one thing they never did was security.
Correct.
Security for the people who were on television. And I mean, it wasn't, people were like, oh, is it because the station was like, in the downtown area? No matter what station I worked, across the country. I mean, we would literally walk out at 11 o'clock at night, or, so when I was on East Coast, midnight.
Yes.
I mean,
Same.
and you're in this open parking lot and anybody could be there. I mean, and
it
was crazy.
True. Well, because the people making the decisions aren't the ones who are the public facing individuals. So their lives aren't at risk because they haven't been stalked and been targeted as had we.
They don't want to spend money on the things that aren't sexy. It's kind of like paying for, insurance, right? Yeah. We all have to do it. None of us like it, right? Because you don't see it like, oh, I could spend all this money on something else. Spend money on the insurance. These are our children. Spend money on it.
In Peoria, Illinois, my hometown, my sister works in the public school system, and for quite some time, they've had all high schools metal detectors that students go through every morning with that single entry, which is critical. And they've also been doing metal detectors at the athletic sporting events, which I've always thought made such perfect sense. And then add to it now this year, you have to turn your cell phone in to the school resource officer when you come into the door and walk through the metal detector. So I get it. People want their kids to have a cell phone for these emergency situations. But when you create a secure campus, including the screening, and then have the SRO presence, parents have been okay with giving that cell phone over in the morning because they feel like it's a safe campus. And we know that cell phone issue, it's just the beginning of mental health to come because of that addiction that kids have.
I understand, and I understand why schools want to ban them, and I understand why pediatricians want to ban them in schools. I understand that, and I'm in full support. And this is what's sad, and this is what's disgusting. I need my children to have, if they're old enough to have a phone, I need them to have a phone. Because in the back of my mind, I'm worried that, that something tragic's going to happen.
Feel that way.
And you can see that woman from Georgia, Aaron, her son texted her. And he said, I had shared it on my AG page. And he said, I get chills thinking about it. He's like, Mom, I'm not joking. There's a school shooting. I'm scared. I mean, it's just like, can you even imagine? Can you even imagine? So it's really, to me, it's not even a what if. It's a when's next? Where's next? Right? And it's
because having worked in that lane that I did where I was involved in crisis communication, I can tell you that every school district that I've ever known about in Eastern Iowa every single one has had an incident involving a child that has access to a weapon, has made a threat, or has potentially brought that weapon on school grounds. So anyone who thinks, like you said, the naivete of it's not going to happen to me, you're really missing the deeper issue of it can happen anywhere. And the mental health is across the board, every socioeconomic background, every race, every gender. Everybody has the potential where they live for violence to be the choice that a young person makes.
I mean, I remember I was in college when Columbine happened. And up until that point, there were a couple of, but that was the first one that was just so, and I remember thinking, oh, like, I remember watching it and I remember crying because I'm thinking, what is happening? Because you see kids that are about your age jumping and running and jumping out windows, and you're thinking, it was kind of like, you know, you never can let this happen again. And then it's been such a commonplace. I can't even tell you how many times I sat behind the anchor desk and said, another school shooting today. I mean, it was Sandy Hook, and I thought Sandy Hook would finally wake people up because you saw these little kids' faces, and they were just making gingerbread houses and they had their parents come in and they were getting ready for Christmas. And that have those faces, you thought that somebody would make a change. And it's not, if you're waiting on the politicians, we're going to be waiting for the rest of our lives because they're not going to do a dang thing because they're going to make it political. Today will be the fight. It's gun rights versus mental health. It's not. It's a people issue, right? It's a soul issue. These are soulless people doing this. Okay. Criminals don't follow rules. So you can have any amount of laws and mandates and mental health stuff. Like, they don't follow laws. So I feel like the communities need to take action. All the mama bear and the papa bears out there, we need to take action. We need to get together. We need to make, again, one point of entry for every school. Put metal detectors in every school.
Yeah, instead of worrying about all the money going to having like the best sporting facility, let's go a little bit to pivot a little bit right to say, what about making sure that we are feeling safe and secure, and our kids, even emotionally, feel good after seeing what they see play out on their phones, because all the clips on TikTok and social media that they're seeing are sharing the horrors of these violent incidents that play out. So, I mean, people that say my kid doesn't watch the news, if they have a device, they're overexposed to everything going on worldwide. That's horrific in many respects, because that's what kids are going to gravitate toward, just like adults, the sensational, news. On a lighter note.
Yes, please take that hard left. Sorry, we had to discuss that.
No, I mean, because we're passionate about it. Family of educators, in your case, longtime child advocate. Mm-hmm. So we are going to have opinions about it. And the difference is that back in our TV news days, if it wasn't on the teleprompter, we really didn't get to say it.
No, we would never have been. We would have been getting this, like, behind the camera, or they just would have, like, gone to black.
I had to laugh when you were talking about, the kids with cell phones. On a lighter note, I think the funny thing that parents will relate to about the cell phone is, how would your kid text you if he or she didn't have a phone to tell you after school they're going to go to Raising Cane's to get a 3-piece? I mean, it's so funny. I get all these texts from my kids, and my sort of Facebook peers also are the same in sharing some of this, where it's like during the day, they'll get this text like, bring me, whatever. And so again, when we forgot something, a book.
Oh, we're done.
The whole day, we're just,
sat there.
We're not going to have it.
Right.
Now it's like you're getting a text and you're an Uber taxi service to bring your kid whatever he or she forgot.
If our parents contacted us at school, or, I mean, like, it was just could you imagine, no.
We would. First of all, we wouldn't have even been able to get a hold of our parents because they were working, and you're not my mom was a teacher and a principal, and your father was an attorney. You're not going to interrupt him in the middle of court.
we would never interrupt. No, and actually it was funny. We were not, in my house, you wanted to call if you were sick, you had to get a hold of my dad. Do not bother my mother at work. Do not, Nanette, I would be just on death's doorstep. And you could hear the nurse Mandy's sick. I mean, my mom was not leaving work because back in the day, there was no flexibility.
Correct.
Especially when you're a woman. She was working in the corporate world in an insurance company, and she was doing really well, but she was not going to leave because she was not going to, she couldn't be a mom. So it was, I remember those days very, very well. Well, Those are back in the, I'm much easier on my kids. My kids could wake up and say, I really don't feel well. I'm like, okay, do you need to stay home? My mom, you had to like vomit in front of her in order to stay home from school. Like it was, you had to have 105 temperature and vomit in front of her. Otherwise you were going to school.
Okay. When you talked about your grandmother and just what a spitfire she was, the energy she had, it so reminded me of my grandma Helen Thomas, so my dad's mom, and my sister reminded me of a hilarious story yesterday that you will love. She was notorious for saying just off the wall, catch you off guard comments, and very memorable in the way that she would deliver these one-liners. So when my mom had been an elementary school teacher for quite some time, she went back to Illinois State to get her doctorate to pursue administration. And in Peoria, back in those days, for women to really break through that glass ceiling, you had to have a doctorate degree, which is incredible when you think of all the men who went from coaching to a superintendency.
Right.
And here's my mom, having to secure a doctorate to be seriously considered. So she did get an interview for this coveted elementary school position. It was a great school, Keller Elementary in Peoria, that she was vying for. And my mom, my sister, and my grandma were all at our house. I wasn't there. Who knows what I was doing. I was out socializing probably.
Out on the streets.
Yeah, I was out in the streets. And my sister said she'll never forget that the phone rang. And my mom was anticipating possibly getting the call to hear the news. Did she get the job?
Right.
Well, my grandma, in all of her craziness and her drive to, be the most humorous person in the room, grabs the phone and says, the Thomas Mule Barn, which ASS do you want?
You are kidding.
Was
it the call?
Didn't say hello, nothing.
Nothing.
And then it wasn't.
And they definitely didn't spell it. Tara doesn't swear, so you know
she
that.
She said it. My grandma said
the word.
So my mom was like, Helen, that could have been my call to find out if I got the job. So
was it though?
No.
Okay,
but I mean, my
guys.
sister, so we just, when you have that grandparent, that relative who says those memorable quips, you never forget that. Like, they live on in these stories being retold by the younger generations of your family.
The story that my grandmother was a Sicilian. She will tell you what she thought of you. This is her nose that's on my face. Like, exactly. And I was dating somebody that nobody liked when I was, young, dumb, and in my very early 20s, maybe still in college. And she was she asked me, she said, are you still dating that boy? And I said, yes, I am. And she says, you hang out with trash long enough, you start to smell like trash. And she looked at me and she went, I smell trash. And then turned her head like to dismiss me. And I was like, okay. I mean, but you don't come back from that. I mean, she would literally.
You never forgot it.
No. Grace Genevieve Trano Goodman, like that woman, she's legendary. So. Yeah.
I love it.
We were also going to talk, I know we're going a little long today, but we wanted to recommend an amazing documentary. It's part of the Netflix Untold series, which we love. And it's about Hope Solo. It's Hope Solo versus U.S. Soccer.
Fascinating.
It is fascinating. So many women who've ever worked in a boys club can relate. Women who are vocal, who have used their voice to speak out against anything that they were passionate about, will be able to relate. I had always thought that Hope Solo, I believed the narrative that was spun. She was a troublemaker. She was mouthy. She wasn't a team player. I sadly believed all of it. So this is the thing. When any time someone or people are hell-bent on making one person a villain, check yourself, because there is always the other side, and the other side holds the truth. Most people will continue to talk about one person and make them the villain when the villain's staying silent, because they know that person is staying silent. So, I mean, I could go on.
And she was a convenient target because, as described and really detailed in this documentary, she had a very volatile personal life. So anything that she was dealing with that spilled into her professional one, it was easy to then, as she described, completely paint her as this out of control, irrational person who has mental health issues. So a very easy target then when the U.S. Soccer Federation effectively turned on her in a very public way. Now, I did remember some of those the timeline, some of those soccer victories at the World Cup, the international stage, what I didn't think about is how, had that played out at a time when social media was so prolific like it is today, things would have been different, because we would have possibly heard more from Hope. Or
I don't know, because
it
it wasn't too long ago. It wasn't too long ago.
Well, then I'm talking about like the 99 team.
Oh, the 99 team.
And when all that started.
No,
I mean, you
1,000%.
trusted whatever little slice
right.
you got on the evening news, because there were no alternative streams of communication.
This is what we talk about. We talk about it in our Faith in 4-Letter Word speaking series, right? The only thing worse than a boys club is a female who is a participating member. So when I walked away from that, there were a lot of other women that were mentioned who I hold in high regard. And then I'm not going to let one, this is what her, what she said, but then it's backed by a lot of facts, right? But it seems like a lot of women turn their back on a sister.
Yes, agreed.
In order to kiss the ring of whomever was paying them.
Of all men leading the soccer federation.
Absolutely.
As depicted in all of the video clips. There wasn't a single woman who had any leadership role in that organization.
Well, you look at the organization, it was so funny. Like, when women's soccer in the United States, they win more than the men. They win more than the men. Like, when was the last time the men won a title in U.S. soccer? And yet they're traveling first class, private planes, and the women are flying coach. And then they have the men have this multi-million-dollar budget, and then the women had, peanut. It's hilarious to me.
And that was the distinction that is so important in this particular lane of sports. Unlike other sports where there is a clear economic disparity, where the men are making the millions and the women are lucky to get, a few spectators, as she's describing, it was flipped in this professional soccer world. The women had the name recognition. They were driving the profits. I mean, I couldn't name a single male professional soccer player in the U.S. during that time, but I had heard of Hope Solo. I knew who Mia Hamm was. I knew Abby Wambach. Is that how you say her name? I knew these people, and I've never been a soccer fan at all. And so that's very telling. So when Hope really fell on the sword fighting for that inequality, everybody else ultimately benefited from the settlement that she wasn't a part of. She had already been, cut loose and cast aside. So you have to watch how that plays out, because it's so interesting that in the end, she was the one who really forged the path of, I'm not going to tolerate this. And then everybody else just got to come in and ride her coattails.
Listen, she asked questions. And she was told that was above her pay grade. And then it was not too long after that, because she started asking questions. So when you do that as a female, that sends the message that the puppet strings are off. Mm-hmm. And that puts a target on your back.
That's the beginning of the end.
That's the beginning of the end. Trust me.
Yeah. So one observation I have to share too that we can appreciate, why are women so petty? Because when you think about...
we don't have enough time.
When you think about Hope Solo and you watch that documentary, the way that her teammates that you were supposed to be so close with ended up treating her publicly. No one did that to Michael Jordan. No one would do that to LeBron. They revere the greatness in their midst. And it's documented, and people went on record that Hope Solo was one of the if not the greatest goalie of all time, one of the greatest female soccer players of all time. So I contrast it now to Caitlin Clark.
Yes.
Because Caitlin has proven in her rookie season that she wasn't just a flash in the pan, and that she wasn't only going to stand out at the collegiate level. She's now truly dominating in some respects at the professional level. And yet all of these women keep hating on her. I just don't get that.
Two things.
Men don't do that.
No, men don't do that, because, a lot of women, I want to see you do well, but never better than me. Right. And then as far as not just women hating on each other, like, we have conditions, right? So when Caitlin Clark, throws a fit, or she gets, oh my God, look at her. She's so arrogant. No one talks about Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan would get into fights and get in people's faces and jaw, and everyone's like, oh my God, he's such a baller. Look at him. We are supposed to be dainty. That's why they came for Hope Solo.
Mm-hmm.
Because true. she literally, if you'll watch, I don't want to ruin the documentary, but
we've told you everything.
She gets benched, right? I believe it was at the World Cup or Olympics. She gets benched after leading the team, shutouts as a goalie, shutout. Not one goal scored on her, gets benched for the final game. She finds out it's because the captains went behind her back and said, let's play the veteran, yada, yada. So now the United States is getting smoked 4-0. So camera pans, of course they do, because it's the media. They pan to her on the bench and she's angry. She's frustrated because she got benched. And then, oh my God.
Yeah.
That's why the team turned on her too. They're like, she's not supposed to act like that. Why can't we show emotion? If LeBron was benched, the commentators were like, this makes no sense. He's benched. He's obviously, look how passionate he is. He's so upset to be pulled out of this game. No, she was irrational. She was too emotional. She wasn't a team player. It's insanity.
It is.
She got set up.
That's what's so perplexing. Only in women's sports would they make an emotional decision. We think this veteran goalie needs to be playing and we're all in our feelings. Men aren't going to make a decision off of feelings. They're going to say, we're going to win at all costs. And they would have put LeBron in the game. Right. I mean, it's really interesting, the dynamic there.
She got just crucified in the post interview. And I remember watching it and I didn't think anything wrong with it. The reporter asked the questions. The reporter was setting her up. The reporter said, you lost like 4-0, 5-0. Would you have stopped those goals? Like the reporter, let's talk about the reporter who asked the question. And Hope said, yes, I would have stopped the goals. I mean, why can't we say what we're good at? Yeah, I would have stopped it. When people,
because she's a woman.
Because she's a woman.
Huge factor.
Because she's a woman. We're not allowed to say that we're good at it. I say I still am a damn good journalist. She's so cocky. No, it's not. And it's not, it's confidence. It's assurance. You are a damn good journalist. We know what we're good at, and let's teach our young girls, say what you're good at. And say it with your chest out. Put some bass in your voice and say it.
You don't have to apologize for owning what you've put so much blood, sweat, and tears into to achieve.
Oh, I know. So
and
go
that's
watch
where
that.
I respect Hope so much. You're going to love how that changes your thinking about professional sports for women. And also what a gift for her that she finally, all these years later, had the opportunity to now tell her side of the story on an international stage. I mean, Twitter X, as it's now called, is filled with supportive comments about her. I'm excited for her to be able to have getting those flowers.
I knew you were I love that. It's true. She deserves it. She deserves it because she said, I never got to say goodbye.
Right.
And we know a lot of people in the TV business, right?
100%.
Who were cast aside,
the website
cast
that
aside.
day.
I mean, I'm thankful. I'm thankful that I got to say goodbye. You got to say goodbye. I got to have that moment.
Well, my goodbye was scripted, so I did a little bit of ad-libbing.
Did you have to have your goodbye approved?
I did.
You did. I was sitting actually on the other set watching you say your goodbye. You didn't look sad at all when you were, if I remember correctly.
I mean, imagine you from the time you're in 7th grade until, in my case, I was 40 years old. Imagine working your whole life to pursue a career that I was blessed to do for almost 20 years. And then at the very end of this ride, your swan song and your time to finally, tie it up with a bow. Oh, here, we're going to tell you what to say.
Right. Don't go off script. Don't let them know all of the other stuff that happened. Let's not do that.
But praise the Lord for social media. We now can reach people in a different platform. And thank you to everyone who's taken some time out of their Friday mornings or whenever they watch this recorded live stream. We appreciate being able to share our feelings, engage with you, other women primarily. Over 84,000 views in the month of August for our new morning show and some sponsorship interest already, which we're flattered
it's crazy.
And excited about. So we just appreciate this new fangled medium that gives us an opportunity to share our voice in a different way.
And we apologize for going a little long this morning. We don't want to waste your time.
We had a lot to talk about.
However, if we have this platform. It's a very large platform, and I think that the issues that we're talking about, keeping our kids safe, that deserved a little bit more of our time this morning. But I hope you have an amazing Friday. Go watch Untold, Hope Solo versus U.S. Soccer. You don't even have to be a soccer fan to watch it. But if you're a woman to watch it, it's something amazing.
Thanks for spending part of your day with us. Have a great weekend.